as all of this stuff with my job is settled, then I will look into some new equipment. So bear with me. I know you guys are very understanding, and I love you so much for it, so thanks. I have a solved case for you this evening, and it has a couple twists, so I hope that it is a new one, and I hope you find it just as intriguing as I did. We are going to talk about Bruce Firman. Bruce lived in a lavish bungalow on the North End Tecumseh Street in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. His hard work as a real estate agent made him privy to this luxury. He lived there with a woman he described as the love of his life, Margaret Benesich. Margaret was a retired healthcare worker, and she and Bruce met in the early 1990s. Her husband had recently passed away, and she described herself as charmed by the former real estate agent. Bruce convinced her to sell her house and shift to St. Catharines, where she allegedly used her savings to purchase the fancy bungalow. She said that Bruce helped her with the handiwork and included his name on the house deed. The two of them comfortably lived with Margaret's daughter from a previous marriage, Elizabeth, until she moved out and went out on her own. From what I could research and find, Bruce spent his leisure time gardening, working in his wood shop, or cycling around town in the evenings. So Margaret and Bruce were married for several years before all that glitters wasn't gold and everything started to go downhill around 2001. The troubles went to the point where they actually decided to file for divorce and go on separate paths. They'd been together long enough that they were common law married. They weren't actually married, I believe. But as per the law, Bruce was entitled to half of the property. But Margaret was angry, and she felt like she had purchased this with her own money, and she did not want Bruce to have part of the property. And their battle became so bitter that they actually, neither one of them would leave the bungalow, but they ended up living on separate floors. He began staying in the basement, and she stayed on the first floor. And according to witnesses, family, friends, they would even not talk if they came across each other in the morning in the house. So, as this legal battle continued and time went by, Bruce met another woman, and her name was Joan. Predictably enough, Margaret was enraged at this. She felt betrayed. She was very, very upset. Bruce had promised this life to her, and he had discarded it and easily found another life with another woman. So Margaret vengefully proposed to make Bruce's life as terrible as she could. She decided that she was going to make it unimaginably hard for him to divorce her. She drug him through the courts. She extracted every rightfully deserved penny. Bruce feel sorry for wrecking her life, basically. So, let me just, as far as I could tell, their marriage was headed downhill before Bruce met Joan, but I think that the aftermath of him meeting Joan led Margaret into this. I'm not gonna let you take my house. I'm not gonna let you take my stuff. I'm gonna take all the money I can get from you, even though he was retired and she was retired. So they were on a fixed income, I would assume. So, but she used all of her savings to purchase this bungalow, so she really didn't want him to have it. And she was angry. And, hell hath no fury, right? So, 42-year-old Elizabeth is dismayed at what she's hearing is going on between her mother and Bruce. So she takes a leave of absence from work to go stay with her mother in November of 2001. Margaret was her only family, and she really wanted to be there to support her through this. So that brings us to November 27th, 2001. Bruce was out and about his day as usual. He had gone to visit Joan, and they had had a good visit. When he returned from her house, he parked his bike in the garage, only to find himself ambushed by two young men. These men were not out to rob Bruce of his money. No, this was far more lethal. These two men repeatedly attacked Bruce. They hit him on the head with a pipe wrench. They bludgeoned him to death with it. Predictably enough, the two young men fled, leaving the pipe wrench behind after the deed was done. Meanwhile, Margaret and Elizabeth were on their way back home after sharing dinner at a restaurant in Niagara Falls. Around 8:45 p.m., when they arrived home, they opened the garage door and they were met with a gruesome scene. 72-year-old Bruce's body lay in a pool of blood. Elizabeth took charge and urged her mother to call the police. She did not want Margaret to see Bruce like this. The mother-daughter duo ran across the street to a neighbor's house to call for authorities. The officers of the Niagara Regional Police Department arrived at the scene to find Bruce on the floor of the garage. The murder weapon lay beside his body. Detective Carrie Harrison rushed to the scene with her team in tow. She was the first female investigator in the Niagara Regional Police Homicide Unit, and this was her first time leading an investigation, and she wasn't about to leave any stone unturned. The medical examiner confirmed the obvious. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. According to the reports, the police found no fingerprints on the pipe wrench, but located a fresh shoe print outside in the mud. And a partial shoe impression was located on the back patio of the garage. Officers initially thought that this may have been a home invasion gone wrong, but they found no indications of a break-in anywhere inside the residence, except for the garage. The lack of evidence indicated that these perpetrators didn't even enter the house, just the garage. Detective Carrie Harrison was taken aback at the anger with which Margaret remembered the deceased. Even though she was shocked by the events of the day, when interviewed, Margaret still remained vengeful. She told police that Bruce had tried to substance abuse counseling, treatment for abused youth, and advice on various youth issues. She had been visiting her mother for the past 5 days. The two of them had gone to Niagara Falls around 3:30 p.m. They watched the Light Festival and did some shopping and had dinner before returning 5 hours later. And apparently they were kind of difficult at dinner. Like, Elizabeth required a lot of attention, stuff was wrong with her food and things like this, so people really remembered them being at this restaurant. But Detective Carey knew something was amiss. So she starts talking to the people around the family. And she starts with Bruce's son, who I believe is named Richard, but I didn't write it down, so I'm so sorry. And Bruce's current girlfriend, Joan. This was a wise decision because it unraveled a web of lies by Margaret and in turn, Elizabeth. A few days before his death, Bruce had warned his son that if anything should happen to him, that the police should look into Margaret. So the police are kind of leaning towards a primary suspect, but she has the perfect alibi, so what is happening? Now, they started to repeatedly question Margaret and Elizabeth, trying to get them to reveal new details or something they hadn't said before, or just anything to make them slip. And it did lead to a valuable clue that would eventually piece this entire case together. Desperate to distract the police from her, Elizabeth singled out a suspicious man, a 19-year-old named Dell, that she had met during her 3-hour bus ride. I think it was a 3-day bus ride. I typed hour though. It was a long bus ride, but I don't know if he was on it the whole time. Sorry, distraction. That she'd met during the bus ride to St. Catharines. However, she underestimated the police when giving this false lead. They searched the CCTV camera footage, and it showed that Elizabeth not only left the bus with Dell, but also got into a rental car with him. So police bring her back in, and they sit her down, and they're like, hey, we see this, what happened? So she reluctantly admits that she'd dropped this kid, because she's 42 and he's 19, off at a hotel and had graciously paid for his room for the night. And the police are like, why would you do that? You don't know this kid. And she made some far-fetched excuse that the police did not believe. So Detective Carey decides, well, I'm going to the hotel. And to her surprise, not only did hotel staff reveal that another man was in that room with Dell, but they found like Tupperware containers that were pretty eerily similar to ones found in Bruce's kitchen. So at this point, the police are like, okay, these men are connected to this murder, and somehow Elizabeth has a hand in it as well. So by now, they know that questioning Elizabeth isn't going to get them anywhere. They have to have more concrete evidence. So they dust the rental car for fingerprints, and it leads them to the identity of the other man in the hotel room, 17-year-old Tommy Nickel, from Kimberley, British Columbia, near where Elizabeth lives. When they catch revealed Elizabeth had reached out to Byron and blackmailed him into killing Bruce to help her mother, Margaret. It turned out that Elizabeth had even offered Byron and Tommy $400 if they did the job well. I mean, geez, thanks for breaking the bank, girl. So the police knew they're not gonna get Elizabeth to confess. So they feel like if they can pressure Byron enough, they can get enough evidence to convict Elizabeth as well. So they find Byron on his way back home to Whistler, British Columbia. In fact, Jack Litch, his mother's partner, had contacted him and urged him to turn himself in to police. It didn't take long for the plot to unravel once they started to question Byron. They discovered that not only did Elizabeth pay for the hotel room for the boys, she had also paid for their bus tickets from BC to St. Catharines. Elizabeth had completely orchestrated the murder of Bruce Firman. Police had enough to charge her for first-degree murder, but they needed Byron to turn on her first. He was reluctant in the beginning to turn against his own mother. He was protecting her. He didn't want to get her into trouble. However, when faced with the severity of his actions, he soon changed his tune. He confessed she'd paid him and Tommy, and that she'd convinced him and his friend to commit the murder. Figuring that they wouldn't get caught, Elizabeth planned an evening out with her mother and then contacted Byron and told him to stand by in the garage and get ready. The two boys waited for Bruce to return and then attacked him with the pipe wrench. The boys fled. The women returned home. Elizabeth had planned everything down to a T. After her arrest, Elizabeth stopped talking to investigators. She never said another word to them. She never confessed to her role in the plot, nor does she ever take any form of responsibility for her actions, or even show any form of remorse. On May 17th, 2006, Elizabeth Cattenby was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole for 25 years. Her son Byron testified against her at the trial, and he was charged as an adult. He pled guilty to a lesser sentence of conspiracy to commit murder, and he received a sentence of 6 years in prison. Tommy Nickel pled guilty to first-degree murder. He was sentenced as a young offender, and he received 6 years in jail. So I was never able to actually find out, and I'm going to Google it really fast. I do this on Patreon all the time. Live updates. I was never actually able to find out if Margaret knew whether or not Elizabeth had planned this whole thing, or if it was just completely Elizabeth kind of taking the bull by the horns and doing whatever she thought she needed to do to protect her mother. I wanted to see. I guess. She did try to appeal. It says she's still. I was trying to see if she was still there or what had happened, but it's giving me all kinds of weird articles anyway. So, okay. was like, well, now, I do think you have to be kind of unhinged when your first thought is, well, let's just get my son to kill him. First of all, she thought that her plan was fail-safe. She thought that for sure no one was going to catch her because she was at dinner with her mother and she purposely like caused a ruckus at the place, like sending her food back and things, and so people would remember that they were there. However, what she didn't count on was CCTV footage. Now, in 2001, there wasn't as much CCTV footage as we have these days. However, catching her getting off of the bus with Byron really led investigators to solving this case. And I think, these people that are arrogant enough to believe that they can commit this perfect crime. Looking at you, Brian Kohlberger. That's how you get caught. You're not crossing all your T's and dotting all your T's and dotting all your I's. Said that a little backwards. You're careless because you're arrogant, and that is how Elizabeth and Byron and little Terry got caught. I think it is extremely sad that a 17-year-old and a 19-year-old were convinced to murder someone that they had potentially never met before. I'm sure Byron did at some point, but for $400, I mean, yes, $400 was a lot in 2001, but at the same time, you're gonna go to jail. And the fact that they only got sentenced to 6 years when they are the ones that actually committed the act is absolutely beyond me. Now, this is in Canada, and the sentences could be different. But I was blown away by the fact that they were only sentenced to 6 years. And that one was charged as an adult and got 6 years, and the other was charged as a minor and got 6 years. I can't imagine, and I've talked about this so many times, how do you brainwash a person into killing someone for you? What in the world do you say to someone in order to convince them to help you commit such a heinous crime? And this was particularly horrible. They didn't just, quickly end it for Bruce. This was painful. It was slow. It was terrible. And I have to think that at some point, if you're not unhinged, that when you're committing this crime, adrenaline or so, but you have some kind of second thought, like, oh my god, what am I doing to this actual person? I think that if there hadn't been 2 of them, Bruce may have gotten away. Myself, they would have done a lot better to make it look more like a robbery, but I'm sure that Elizabeth wasn't thinking about things like that. She was just thinking that she wasn't going to get caught, and it didn't really matter. So, sometimes the absolute arrogancy of these people just blows me away. So you tell me down below, do you think that Margaret asked Elizabeth if there was some way that she could help her get rid of Bruce? Or do you think that Elizabeth concocted this scheme all on her own, thinking she was protecting her mother and or giving her mother what she wanted? Because if Bruce was out of the picture, Margaret would get everything. All of the money, the bungalow, whatever else it was that they were fighting over. There wouldn't be any more legal disputes. Margaret would have everything that she wanted. As someone who has lost their mother, I understand the unwavering loyalty to a parent and trying to help them and make them happy. Unfortunately, to make her happy. Anyway, please let me know down below if you knew of this case, if you were suspecting the two twists of it being Margaret's daughter and Margaret's grandson. And let me know down below if you have any other case suggestions for my next video. As I said, hopefully I will have some new equipment soon. I did get a new job. For those of you that don't know, my doctor that I work for is retiring. Well, he's retired. He retired on the 14th. And so our entire company is closing. The building is being sold, and I have just been absolutely devastated about it. Quick life update. And I have been interviewing diligently. I went on like 8 interviews, and I finally chose a place. And I will start there on September 8th. So a couple of my coworkers are also going there, so it's a new job, but with some familiar people, which, thank goodness, because my anxiety was through the roof. I had a really, really bad day last week, and I was just like at a 15 the whole freaking day. So anyway, I love you guys so much. I will see my patrons over on the channel in a little while, and I will catch you guys in a couple weeks. Thanks again for watching. I appreciate you so much.